Hi, welcome back to Wednesday Weaving. As you can see, I've got my little 30 centimeter loom set up on the table, and I'm putting up an extremely short warp. Now this warp is going to serve many purposes for us in terms of demonstration. And the first thing that I'm going to demonstrate is how to change color in your warp. So often I see people, when they come to change color in the warp, what they would do is they would snip off the old color, take it around the stick and tie it in place as we do at the beginning and end of our warp. Now that's actually not the right way to do it. What you should do when you change color in your warp is not tie the old color onto the stick and then the new color onto the stick. You simply tie the old color onto the new color. Use an overhand knot, nice and strong, and it's not going to move very far. And if that knot doesn't sit exactly on the stick, you can see mine is a little bit over, it actually doesn't matter. You want it to be close to the stick if you possibly can. It must definitely be behind the reed, but you'll soon get the hang of getting it quite accurately onto the stick. Now the reason we do it like this is because at every place where you tie your warp onto the stick, this little warp thread can move up or down. And as soon as you get that kind of movement on your warp, you have a propensity for a discrepancy in your tension. So the fewer of these tie-ons to the stick that you have, the better. Now there are some times when you have to tie onto the stick. Again, I'm going to pull a couple of these blue threads through, and then I'm going to show you why you might have to tie a new color onto the stick. Okay, so I've got my blue section threaded after my yellow section. And now what I want to do is I want to thread my slots with alternate blue and yellow threads. Now obviously if I'm going to thread one slot of blue and one slot of yellow, I'm not going to cut and tie every time I change color. The correct way to do that, and this is what you would do if you were threading up for a houndstooth or a log cabin pattern, or any of the color and weave patterns for that matter, is now I have to add in an extra color. So now I am tying it onto the stick. I'm not tying it onto the old color because that would just be ridiculous. So this is one of the instances where one would, in the middle of your warp, in the middle of the width of your warp, actually tie onto the stick again. But for general purposes, if you are changing color, so you're going from a red block to a blue block to a yellow block to a green block, then you would cut your old color and tie your new color onto your old color. If you're adding in an extra color, as I have here, then you have to tie it onto the stick. So it's just, now I've tied on my yellow, I've threaded one yellow slot, and I've now threaded a blue slot. Now I look at where my yellow thread is lying in relation to the stick. It's lying over the stick. Take my yellow thread around and pick it up from underneath. I check the position of my blue thread. It too is lying over the stick, so I take it around and pick it up from underneath. Now it's the turn of the yellow again. I like to, if I'm working with two colors like this, I like to keep them well out of the way of each other so that they don't get tangled. Now my yellow obviously is lying under the stick, so I take it around and bring it up over the stick. Now it's the turn of the blue. So if I'm threading up a multicolored warp like this, I wouldn't have these crossovers being too wide. So I would say that the maximum I would do would be to carry a color for 3 slots. It also depends on the size of the reed that you're using. You must remember that as soon as you have these crossovers happening behind the reed here, it is actually going to have an effect on your weaving when you get towards the end of the warp. So, if you were doing, say for example, you were doing 4 threads of yellow and 4 threads of blue and 4 threads of yellow and 4 threads of blue, then I probably would cut and tie each time. But if I were doing 3 slots of yellow and 1 slot of blue and 3 slots of yellow and 1 slot of blue, then I wouldn't. So you really just have to learn to use your intuition here a little bit. Don't err on the side of laziness, which is a great failing of mine. I tend to take shortcuts, and you don't want to do that because you can, as I say, get into trouble with these crossovers if they're too wide. So I've come to the end of my 2-color section here. Now it's time to take the yellow out. So because I'm not tying a new color onto the old color, I'm simply going to cut it and tie it onto the stick. So as I say, you want to tie onto the stick as little as possible, but sometimes you actually have to do it. So now I've got another 6 slots of the blue, and now I'm going to change my blue for the yellow again. So as I did the first time, I'm just going to snip the blue off, and I'm going to tie the new color onto the old color. Try and get it sort of more or less in place with the stick, and now I can finish off my warp, and when I get to the end I'm just going to cut off the yellow and tie it on. So that's how you would change your color in your warp. 2 ways of doing it. If you are changing from one block of color to the other, you tie the new color onto the old color, and if you're threading alternating colors, then you simply tie the new color onto the stick and you overlap them on the back. But be careful not to make your overlaps too big. So I hope that helps. It will make your life a little bit easier, I think. Tying the new color onto the old color is in itself a lot less peaty than tying onto the stick every time. And as I say, it's a lot more stable as far as your tension is concerned. So in the light of all this information, I hope that you have a really good weaving week ahead of you. Until next time, bye-bye.